Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick Advertising podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of content, creativity, culture, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest. We have Jason Myers. He's the Chief Revenue Officer at Austin Lawrence Group. He has 2 decades of experience in B2B content marketing and consultative sales. He's also the host of the SaaS Backwards podcast. Really smart guy. I found him online and reached out, and he was kind enough to come on the show and talk to us about SaaS and marketing. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you for spending the time. So you have a cool background. You've done everything. Like, you started your career in PR, you've done marketing, you've done sales, a lot in between. And I think this is cool because I think the world is moving more towards generalists. But I'm curious, you have such a big background. You've probably have done all of the parts of a marketing and sales org. Are you in agreement with that? Do you think the world is headed towards generalists and specialists are gone? I'm curious your perspective before we even get into like more granular parts of SaaS marketing.
It's a good question. I'm not sure if I have an answer to that, to be honest with you. I think specialists are still needed, especially when it comes to advertising, right? Like I'm writing a blog on this right now, like in-house teams tend to, not do as well on advertising, I think, as like potentially hiring an agency. The reason is an agency is looking at this stuff for hundreds of clients all the time. And an in-house team generally doesn't have experience there. So, today that's a big problem because you want to catch somebody's attention. You got to know what you're doing. You can't just throw ads out there or throw content out there like you used to be able to and attract, the right people. You got to actually have stuff that people want to read or consume. So there's a whole psychology behind that. So I do think that there is definitely a role for specialists. We play that, but we also do a lot of general work too. So we do a lot of filling in skill gaps for the companies that we work with. So, in fact, we just talked to a prospect that's exactly what they need. They need to hit the ground running and don't have a lot of resources and don't want to wait to hire somebody to do it. And we can jump in right now and generate content and figure out messaging and hit the ground running.
So, in your blog, and I'm guessing this is actually how you run a program at your company, you talk about a framework for enterprise SaaS. And I'm curious, whether someone's going to hire you or go on their own. I feel like you guys sort of stand by this as the way to do SaaS marketing. Do you want to go through like what that looks like for listeners to understand how you view SaaS marketing?
Sure. So in the B2B SaaS world, generally with complex products, right? These are not small dollar, like easy decisions. They're much more complicated. They usually have buying committees. We are fans of the Challenger sale. For marketers out there that may not have read that book, we recommend the second book in the series, actually called The Challenger Customer, because it talks more about content, but it talks about the big problem in SaaS world or B2B world, which is that problem in SaaS world that is when I come to a website or I want to buy a product, right? It's because I've got a problem that has to be solved. Whether that's somebody telling me to research solutions or whatever that buying committee looks like in the Genesis, that's what I'm doing. So if I'm going to research SaaS products, I'm thinking about we have to solve a problem. So if your messaging isn't talking about that problem or getting agreement on a problem worth solving, as we call it, then they're going to skip right over your messaging. Now, some of this doesn't apply in consumer world and all that kind of stuff, but primarily that's what we're talking about in B2B. And hardly any websites, advertisements in SaaS world are actually talking about the problems and painting a picture for how that outcome could be better. And, they use platitudes. They use, hey, we're the #1 platform. We use AI to do XYZ. All of these things are going to gloss right over the prospect because they come to the website. They want to know, are you a good fit for solving my problem? And if I can't find that immediately, you risk having them bounce off the site, ignoring your content, etc. So we want to find people that agree that this is a problem. That's right out of the challenger sale. So if we can attract those people, I've really won half the battle, because all I have to do from there is point out how hard it is to solve that problem today. Like, so companies typically try to solve it by doing XYZ, it doesn't work very well. And then you provide the reframe. That's why we're doing it this way. And that's when you introduce concepts like AI. We're using AI to do this differently, and we've proven it to be more successful. That's the formula. That's the formula for your advertisements, for your content, for your website messaging, for everything else. So now, how do we find it? So the methodology for finding that is to interview customers. We want to interview subject matter experts and salespeople too, because I want to hear what they're hearing on the sales calls. But the problem is that what we hear on sales calls isn't necessarily the whole picture. So they may say that they have a pain, but people buy emotionally and justify rationally, right? So you're hearing the rational justification. So if you really want to understand how to build messaging or a framework that is going to move somebody off of status quo, and that is your biggest problem in B2B, is that, like, I may feel like I have this problem, but it's not something that's pressing to do. And not only that, you have to convince everyone on the buying committee that now is the time to be solving this problem. So if I can attract people that agree that it's a problem worth solving, or if I can just attract people that agree that it's a problem, and then in discovery, push them so that they understand that there's a gap between where they are now and where they want to be, then we can move them toward, oh yeah, we got to solve this now. That's what we want to do. That's what we want to attract.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I have a lot of friends in B2B marketing as well. I'm marketing to marketers, and a discussion that I have had so many times with my friends at big companies is that a lot of what you have to solve for are actually political problems. Like you said, you have to get everyone to agree. And on the other hand, when I'm selling into startups, they're all economic problems. There's no politics. It's just, how can we do this better, faster, stronger? And it's funny because as a startup, you can have the better solution and not win the sale if you can't get that company to make a decision to do something a different way. And I think that's one of the most maddening things for people at a startup, because that's a lot of times it feels like you're almost like getting away from like the essence of why the startup exists, to do this thing really efficiently, right? And you kind of have to come to terms with, like, yes, companies are capitalistic, but they're also very political, especially the bigger ones.
Well, and the problem with the startups too is that they don't have the name recognition a lot of times that some of their competitors do. And so they're going to have a tougher time getting the doors opened. That's why we really like that challenger model, because if we can, again, put out content or advertisements that are getting people to nod their heads in agreement that this is a problem that we want to solve. Not only are their competitors not doing that, but if they agree with that, then you have the opportunity to educate them and with your content and bring them in and build trust and relationships that way. So it's a real leg up for startups that pursue that route.
So you have a lot of interesting insights on your blog. I pulled out a few I wanted to dive more into, just because I think they're kind of either contrarian or just things people don't think about. So you have a post where you talk about how professional services can actually like hurt SaaS growth. And I think that's interesting because I think a lot of SaaS companies like want to add this layer of, helping the company on board, or, doing all these things. So I'm curious, can you talk a little bit more about why that might not be a good idea?
Yeah, I think you really have to look at the software models. And there's a lot going on in the go-to-market world, so to speak, is what they're calling it now, which is started out as sales and marketing alignment, and then we have to add customer service in there so that we're talking about go-to-market strategies. But the reason I bring that up is that the software industry has changed. Where it used to be in the beginning, the you would market to a customer, and like this is before the internet really, so they would be buying hardware, they'd be buying the software, the licensing, and all that kind of stuff, and then usually the support contracts on top of that was how you made a lot of the revenue. Well, that whole model has changed. I mean, I guess there's still some companies out there doing it that way, but today, if you look at a SaaS model, like back then the burden was really on the buyer, right? Like, because I'm taking a big risk spending all this money. I've got to buy all this hardware. I got to, buy all these big time contracts. I started my career in electronic medical record systems, and this is exactly how it was, right? Like we would sell these big hardware platforms through like IBM or DEC, and then we would bundle the software on top of that and then charge them on support contracts. It just doesn't happen as much anymore. And today the risk is I'm bringing in customers that are paying monthly. And so the burden is more on the sellers now, the risk, right? Because if somebody comes in, like it costs a lot to acquire a customer. And usually, those payback times are, a year, two. I had a customer recently, it was 3 years payback. So if a customer leaves in that amount of time before you've gotten the payback, you lose that money. So that's the reason that like a lot of these, contracts have kind of changed. We've moved away from, we don't need as much services on top of these systems anymore. They're more, kind of ferreted out in the software itself. So that's kind of one of the big reasons I see that on that post.
Yeah, and I worry a lot of young startups are just like eager to close the deal and are, maybe the salespeople are promising crazy things and, writing checks that the end team has to cash. And it's probably not a good rabbit hole to go down.
Exactly, because it shows up a couple of years later, somebody leaves early, and then you've got a churn problem, and all of a sudden you're not profitable.
It's not good. So in terms of lead generation, because you guys are ultimately at heart lead gen guys, do you want to talk about the KPIs that you see are important? Maybe some of the things marketing teams get wrong in terms of metrics?
Yeah, so lead generation, I've started calling it demand capture because that's kind of what it is. I think lead gen has gotten a bad rap, but really, I mean, all it is 3 to 5% of your TAM is in a buying window at any given time, right? That's Chet Holmes from the Ultimate Sales Machine. And, demand capture is all about finding those people that are kind of in market or moving into a buying window. And that's where your direct response types of marketing are going to help you. So advertising and, uh, you know, uh, landing pages and the whole infrastructure to capture leads, so to speak. The problem is that all of this digitally has been built around the predictable revenue model. It came out in about 2011 by Aaron Ross from Salesforce. And what that did was kind of compartmentalize the sales function. So instead of having an AE that is a full cycle sales rep, we have now SDRs or BDRs in the middle that nurture and set appointments for the AEs. And that's all good. We need those people. The problem is that today's buyer really isn't having it. That worked it worked up to about 2015 or 2016 when there wasn't as much content. And so when you got an email that spoke to you highly about a problem, right? You pay attention to it. Today, I don't pay attention to anything in my email, and like it's really hard to get resonance there. And on top of that, nobody wants to talk to a 20-something BDR that knows nothing about my business. I mean, it's annoying. And they're calling up with sales scripts and all this kind of stuff. So the whole model is kind of broken. I won't say it's dead, because it's certainly, there's companies that are still making it work. It's just that it gets more inefficient every year. We kind of need a new playbook. And I think a lot of companies don't know what to do differently. The whole idea of inbound is broken. Because SEO is another problem in the B2B world. Like SEO is moving the way of AI snippets and large publishers. If you listen to Rand Fishkin at all, he's got a lot to say on the subject. If you're a startup B2B SaaS and still trying to play the SEO game, good luck. Competing to get on page one just isn't going to happen. But instead, they should be just trying to deliver customer insights and then getting that in front of their potential target audience. Like, the better you can add value, the more you're going to attract the people that agree that this is a problem worth solving.
Yeah, for SEO is a really interesting area right now for AI. And I find that AI is a really useful research tool, right? It's in a lot of cases, I can, like, if we're talking about SaaS and I'm looking for a solution, like I can ask the AI for like 5 companies in an area and it will give me them. And so if like one company, but if one company's at the top, I'm still then going to go ahead and query that company. I'm going to look at their website. I'm going to read their social feeds. I'm going to get a sense for how much this company actually cares about the product, especially the more commoditized it is. Like, their marketing ends up separating it for me. I'm like, okay, these guys really care. Like, they're going to give me good customer service. Oh, I see they respond to people on LinkedIn. That company's probably the right choice for it. So for me, it's like, search isn't dead. It's just like being used differently than it was in the past.
That's right. And the other problem too is that for a long time we've had such mediocre content dominating the tops of the search results that people just don't believe vendor information anymore.
Yeah, I'm surprised by Google's search quality team of some of the things they surface, and it becomes more apparent in areas that a lot about. So it's I don't know, like, why they've deemed, for example, like Reddit such a trustworthy source. Like Reddit, like, they might be like for like really niche things, but it's kind of an interesting time for a lot of the AI startups to do a really good job and get their LLMs to really give you high quality results. So like, I'm a big user of Perplexity. I think their tool is great. It's almost replaced Google for me. And yeah, the other thing for B2B I'd love for you to talk on is I find and word of mouth has always been large, but for me, in like the current state of social, wherein like most links are suppressed, I find if I have a solution, I will, text a friend or go into like my, nerd marketer group chat and ask them about the problem. And so for me, I don't know if you're seeing this too, that word of mouth, like direct word of mouth, not even necessarily like people tweeting something, but just going direct to a person and asking them is like really powerful.
Yeah. In fact, I'm in the middle of a great book on that right now called Contagious. And it's talking about exactly what happens when something goes viral. Like, what does it take for something to go viral? And it makes that point that it's all about word of mouth or sharing. And so if you take that idea or that concept, like what you just said, that's how business always happens. It's always happened that way, always will happen that way. Well, assuming the AI doesn't completely take us over. But but the question is like, so what kind of content do I need to develop that is so good that people want to share it? Because that's what triggers. Like, if I see a good piece of content that I think I can help, I could, you say, oh, my friend Adam was talking about that just the other day. I'm going to forward in this article. And you see people doing that on LinkedIn all the time. Like, I'll write something and somebody will repost it and tag one of their friends. Like, hey, you look at this.
Yeah, and I think for you on the agency side, what what that does is establishes trust. And like for me, when I'm bringing an agency, the number one thing I look for, they have to be smart, obviously, but if someone is sharing your ideas, they inherently trust you. They inherently trust that if they were to share one of your stories or recommend you, that you would provide a great experience for that person. Because that trust is like the really important part of the equation, in addition to, oh, I know they could do the job, but beyond that, are they going to do a great job? And am I putting my reputation on the line? And am I comfortable doing that?
Well, and that's a great point on the experience too. Like everything that we're doing really should be focusing on how do we create a better buyer-centric experience, right?
Yeah.
So I would argue that cold calling them with a 20-something BDR is not a good experience.
So in terms of agency life, I worked on agents. I started my career on the agency side. I thought it was a great way to begin a career because you get insight into at least several verticals, if not 4 or 5, even like 6 or 7 over the course of your time at the agency. And it's kind of fun because you get to work on all these different problems. But one thing I always saw at pretty much every agency I was at was the bottleneck ended up being talent. It ended up being, how do we have enough doers to actually get everything done, great account people that service the client really well. So how do you guys solve for that? And you're a really respected agency. You guys obviously have the time to create great content. How do you solve the talent issue in marketing?
So because we're a little smaller agency or boutique firm, we tend to attract people that stay with us a long time. I think that's probably the biggest issue. Like in the agency world, like if you join an agency, like you said, like you get a lot of exposure to a lot of different things, but you're generally not compensated as much as in the private market. So it is, sometimes you lose those good people to, a company that they join or whatever. So luckily we haven't had too much of that problem, mostly because we're small. I think as we scale, we might run into that, but uh, it's just a more of a matter. Culture is huge, right? Like you got to make it a really good place to work where people can excel in what they want to pursue, right? And if you do that well, then people won't leave.
Yeah, I'd like to
Even if
see.
they're compensated a little bit less.
Yeah, I'd like to see more agencies kind of do the law firm route where they graduate younger people up to partner, and I know some do that. I think that that's really the way to keep your young talent from going to a startup and trying to necessarily play venture lotto and cash a big check, right? Because
Well, I
most of
think
them
that's a
don't.
good point.
Most of
Yeah,
them
we're
don't work
we're
out.
looking at an ESOP model. Mm-hmm.
So, Jason, what are some of the clients that you guys are like really proud of the work you've done and sort of the example of that work?
So right now we're really proud of the work. It's not technically a SaaS, but it's still, we're doing a lot of advertising messaging work for them right now. But what we are particularly happy about was that we came in and immediately were able to uncover a bunch of stuff that they were doing wrong that was costing them a ton of money. Like, for example, they had a person in that didn't know. The problem there was that they had a person that did not know what they were doing in the media buying space. And they were doing things like using the LinkedIn lookalike audience tools. And the result was 40% were spam clicks. So by eliminating that within a week, we freed up about 200,000 annually for what they were wasting on spam clicks. I mean, it's just stupid stuff like that companies are doing that really costing them a lot of money. Like, you really got to have people that know what they're doing if you're going to bring this in house.
Yeah, I've definitely in my consulting days gone in and seen quite a bit of efficiency. And I think it naturally just happens as the companies grow larger and, teams expand. And you get, pet projects and people saying they really love X or Y. And it's kind of, it's more vibes based than analytics based, which you're definitely an analytics guy as well. So um, I'm curious in terms of, a lot of you guys a lot of your work's focused on performance. Do you do brand work as well? And how do you measure the success of it for those campaigns?
So yeah, in I like to have the caveat in B2B. Brand is built as a byproduct of putting out good content and educational content in the first place. So we're not Corona, right? Like I'm not building a brand for awareness sake. Like I don't have the money and the time to, to make sure that when you go to the beach that you think about having a Corona, right? So I always like to say that because I think a lot of companies put way too much emphasis on trying to control the brand, so to speak, as opposed to just develop content that your customers really want, and your brand will develop as one that people can trust, build relationships with, etc. So that's you in B2B, you build it through good content.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that as well. I think, there's probably a point where you're almost over status signaling as a B2B company, where like your user, like if you do it too extreme, your users are wondering why aren't they fixing the bugs in this product, and they're, spending the money on a Super Bowl ad, right? If it gets that far. Like I think there's a line, but I do think some status signaling is important, just, at a certain level to signify, hey, they're making the investment in this, big campaign or this big event, and it's helping just show trust that I can give these guys, the 7-figure contract. So I do agree with you though, making sure you're actually answering all their pain points is like, that's table stakes, right?
Yes, most definitely.
So I'm curious if you wanted to chime in a little bit around the AI debate a little more, because I have to ask all marketers about this. Do you think teams are going to look the same in the future, or are they going to be like, set like 30% as large as they are now, or 50% as large? Like, is everyone really going to need, a dedicated copywriter and, a dedicated analyst when I could just go to the AI and say, draft me an email campaign, or, hey, do some analysis on the spring, the spring special, or, the campaign, the Q1 campaign. Because it seems like we're getting to a point where a lot of tasks that I would normally give to a more junior person, I can give to the AI, and it's not like a tomorrow thing. It's a thing that exists now.
Yeah. So really hard to anticipate what this might look like. I kind of rack my brain kind of trying to figure that out. I can tell you where we're at today. I'm using the Chat GPT quite a bit in helping me put together content, but it needs me to direct it. So for example, like if I ask it to write an article on a topic, it's going to give me mediocre stuff. If I break that down and tell it to give me an outline and give it some parameters, and then work with that outline section by section to massage it to where I want it, that works really well, and it speeds me up big time. Like, what used to take a week to create a blog post, I'm doing in an afternoon. So really big stuff there. It's also kind of fun to play around with the picture generation. Although if you've played around with that, some of the stuff's not there. Like if you tell it to make corrections, it kind of does it, but like you can say, like, take out this, and it doesn't do that, or goes and hallucinates. So there's still a lot of quirks in it. So will it have the capability of being able to soup to nuts, like create something that's totally worth reading? I don't know. I tend to think that where we are right now is just going to add, a lot of companies are going to use it with mediocre writers. And so it's going to produce a lot more mediocre content because that's where it's pulling the bulk of their stuff from. But if you have a experienced writer driving it, that's a big difference. Where what goes tomorrow, I don't know.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Great humans in the driver's seat right now. AI just lets them go faster. I think. And then there's also the whole Jevons paradox, where the more that we add different technologies, they end up just creating more work for everyone. The notion of spiraling complexity. So, but I think it's an interesting time. Like I think in a lot of ways it's fun to be a marketer again, because for a lot of the silly or nonsense or repetitive work, like the AI will help you, sort data and do things that honestly, like no one should be doing, right?
Well, I'll tell you from a content creation perspective, it's made it a lot more fun. Like, for example, like I'll create a video from a podcast and then I'll upload the transcript and say, hey, create me a LinkedIn post and I'll give it a couple of different styles that I like and say, write it in the style of these people or whatever. And it really gives me some good stuff, and like, or I'll say, write me a YouTube shorts description and give me some tags. And it does all of that for you. So it's really speeding up that process. And all of that was very tedious work in the past, right? Like you create the piece of content and then there's all this stuff around it to get it on the platforms and promote it and all that kind of stuff. And so a lot of that is much easier. So been pretty excited about that. Again, like you said, it makes it fun to be a content creator again.
Yeah, and your posts and your content are always really interesting and human. So you're not just outsourcing it all to AI. It's like pretty obvious that
No, I'm
the
still
ideas.
driving it. I'm
Yeah,
still driving it personally, like
I think
everything.
that's the risk is you were to go in and let machines do everything for you, which at that point it's not even fun, right? Like,
Well,
so
and on the sales front, I don't know if you've played around with any of the AI tools that are writing sales emails for you, but I've never seen one that's any better than anything else that's out there. Most of this stuff is crap because it's pulling from 99% of the stuff that just doesn't work. And then this whole idea of personalization, it's going into LinkedIn profiles and it's pulling out a nugget or something like that, but it's usually gibberish. Like in the outreach, it's all about contextual or context and relevance. So like, and it's just unfortunate we got to do that work. You can use the AI to help you there with some of the background research to be contextual and relevant. Like, for example, like I've had it listen to podcasts of a CEO that I'm trying to get in front of and tell me to pull a quote out of that podcast that I can refer, say, hey, you said this, I really like that, this is what we do, thought might be worth a discussion. So awesome there, but again, it still needs me to drive it.
Yeah, I think the notion of what you're saying is basically using it as a research assistant is really smart. And it's a much faster research assistant. You don't have to pay it. It's efficient. And it just says yes. So Jason, one question to end with that I think is important to ask guests right now is a lot of young people are entering the business world. It's a challenging time for them. I think the ones I've talked to have had varied degrees of success. Can you give some words of wisdom for young folk leaving college who are entering our sector, some things they can do to ensure a great career?
Yeah, I'm going to talk to the marketers here. Study sales. That's my big piece of advice. Because that'll help you more than anything. Like one of my favorite stories is when I started a magazine in mid 2000s in Austin, Texas. I come from a PR marketing background, and I, knew how to write articles and all that kind of stuff. And I went out to the networking groups and started, trying to sell advertising. And I found out really fast that I don't know how to sell. And so I went through Sandler at the time. And I'm going to tell you, like, I learned more about writing content from Sandler than I did from any of the marketing schools that I went to. Because ultimately, marketing, you got to sell something. And I think we forget that. We think we're here to entertain people, branding, so to speak. At the end of the day, we got to move people off the status quo to take action. And that's what a good salesperson knows how to do. And you as a marketer need to understand that as well. So
I love that answer. And I would agree wholeheartedly. Jason, you've been a great guest, really interesting guy. I will put links to your social profiles in the show description, but for anyone just listening, where can people connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best place. My name's a little common, so might be a little bit harder to find. But if you look for Content Maven, then you'll find me that way.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jason, for joining us. And for everyone else, we will see you with a new episode shortly. We will be back next week.